Welcome to Young and Restless Today. Today we're going to unravel the incredibly complicated events at Genoa City. There are tons of rumors swirling around the Newman family, but what's the truth? In this video, I'll summarize the confirmed spoilers for Friday and offer some personal theories about Victor's next move. Is he protecting his family or planning a new takeover? Let's analyze it together. Kane was furious when he discovered Lily had conspired with Victor to plot against him. All his efforts were in vain when he received only Lily's betrayal. What would his next move be? No longer a small crack in trust, no longer a misunderstanding that could be covered up with a few belated justifications. This time the truth struck Kane like a cold, cruel blow. When he discovered that Lily not only knew about Victor's new plan, but was also a part of it, everything inside him froze. The feeling of betrayal didn't come in an explosive burst, but rather smoldered, heavy, and deeply ingrained like a blunt knife slowly cutting into his self-respect. Victor's manipulation of others was nothing new. Kane understood that man all too well, understood how Victor always viewed every relationship as a tool to achieve his ultimate goal. But Lily was different. That's what made the wound even deeper. What hurt Kane the most wasn't necessarily her siding with Victor, but the fact that she had manipulated him into a game he should have known about. In that moment, the hurt was no longer a private emotion between a man and a woman with a complicated past, but had become a dangerous driving force, capable of pushing a person to either collapse or rise up in an unexpected way. Kane didn't choose to collapse. The more pain he felt, the more clear-headed he became. The more cornered he felt, the more he understood that if he remained silent, he would lose everything he had left. But what complicated his decision wasn't just his wounded pride. Beneath the anger lay a genuine concern for Lily, though he himself didn't want to admit it. He could resent her for her betrayal. He could feel humiliated for trusting the wrong person. But he couldn't stand by and watch Victor drag her deeper into his familiar cycle of control. Kane understood Victor better than most people. He knew Victor never truly considered anyone an equal ally. Those who seemed to be cooperating with him were often just pawns kept until they were no longer useful. Lily might believe she was part of a meticulously planned scheme, but Kane understood that, sooner or later, Victor would make her bear the brunt of the consequences if things went off track. This realization prevented Kane from reacting instinctively with a simple walkout or overt retaliation. He wanted to overturn the game, but not just to destroy Victor. He wanted to sabotage the plan from within, to sever Victor's power where he felt most confident, and simultaneously pull Lily out of that dangerous orbit before it was too late. From that moment, Kane entered a completely different state. He was no longer the betrayed man acting on impulsive emotions. He became a cold, cautious, and frighteningly patient observer. He began to retreat, concealing his vulnerability, preventing Victor and Lily from realizing how much he knew. This silence was the first step in his counterattack. Kane understood how Victor operated, the logic of power he always imposed on everyone. Victor didn't build his plans on genuine trust, but on dependence, fear, and carefully divided links so that no one could see the whole picture. Such a structure looked solid, but it was actually more fragile than it seemed. Just a few misplaced pieces of information, a few misplaced suspicions, and the entire machine would begin to bite back. Kane knew this wasn't the kind of victory that could be achieved through a direct confrontation. To defeat Victor, he had to use Victor's own principles against him. He secretly gathered information, meticulously tracing every detail of the new plan. No action was too obvious, no move bold enough to immediately arouse suspicion. Kane simply observed, pieced together, and waited for the right weakness to appear. He paid close attention to Lily's role in the entire plan, not only because it was key to understanding Victor's intentions, but also because he knew Lily would be the dividing line between saving and completely destroying everything. She wasn't the center of power, but she was the crucial link. If Victor was the brains of the plan, Lily was the part that allowed it to function smoothly without alarm. This also meant she was the most vulnerable point if the plan began to crack. Kane understood that all too well. Therefore, every step he took had to consider two parallel objectives, weakening Victor and keeping Lily from a direct fall. The internal turmoil finally reached a point where Victor could no longer ignore it. He began to realize his plan was slipping out of his grasp, but things had gone too far to reverse. A few stricter orders couldn't mend the widening cracks. A few hasty adjustments couldn't restore the crumbling trust within the organization. Victor, accustomed to absolute control, was even more enraged by this kind of vague failure. This wasn't the kind of attack he could immediately counter. The saboteur didn't come forward openly, left no clear enough trace, and planted the fissure in precisely the right place, causing the entire system to self-destruct. Only when Victor realized he was being betrayed from within did all doors to repair the damage close. The moment Victor understood his plan was completely collapsing was also the moment his power was most severely damaged. It wasn't just a failure, but a failure in an unexpected way. A man like Victor could tolerate loss, but it was difficult to accept being betrayed by his own logic. His anger, therefore, wasn't just anger at the collapse of his plan, but also the rage of someone forced to confront his underestimation of Kane. For a long time, Victor had probably become accustomed to seeing Kane as someone who could be manipulated, pushed aside, or hurt to the point of losing any real ability to retaliate. But this time, Kane didn't react in a predictable way. He didn't charge indirectly, didn't try to win by noise, but patiently dismantled the foundation of the entire plan brick by brick. It was the kind of victory that not only defeated Victor, but also forced him to retreat in disappointment and bitterness. Ultimately, Victor's plan failed completely. Everything fell apart not in a single explosion, but in a chain reaction as each link crumbled. Victor was forced to retreat, his anger barely concealed. But for Kane, this wasn't a moment of complete triumph. Because when the storm passed, what remained was not only Victor's defeat, but also the awkward silence between him and Lily. He had accomplished what he wanted, disrupted the plan, rescued Lily from control, and proven himself not as weak as Victor had thought. But that victory couldn't erase what had happened. It didn't erase the feeling of betrayal. It didn't automatically mend the broken pieces. It didn't make the pain any easier. On the contrary, it opened up another, even more difficult phase, looking back at each other after everything, both knowing that the relationship had crossed a point of no return. Yet, within that wreckage, a fragile opportunity emerged. Kane rescued Lily not only from Victor, but also from her own downward spiral. He proved his worth not through words, but through action, through his clear thinking, through his ability to transform hurt into strength instead of blind cruelty. And Lily, though unable to immediately atone for all her mistakes, cannot deny the fact that the only person who truly understood her, was angry with her, and still cared enough to pull her out of the abyss was Kane. This doesn't guarantee an easy reconciliation, but it opens a door. A small, fragile, cautious door, but a real one. Perhaps, after all, that's what matters most. It's not about going back to how things were, but whether the two people who hurt each other still have the courage to stand before each other and face everything truthfully. What makes this story so poignant is that it doesn't give anyone a perfect victory. Kane defeated Victor, but couldn't say he wasn't hurt. Lily was saved, but couldn't overcome her guilt overnight. Victor failed, but the shadow of his power certainly hadn't completely vanished. Everything only temporarily closed at a point from which relationships would be forced to redefine themselves. And perhaps that's the spirit that makes the young and the restless truly special, not just about intrigue and overthrow, but also about lingering emotional wounds. Relationships that are both salvaged and burdened with immense pain, and choices where right or wrong is no longer measured by simple logic. Personally, I find this approach very haunting because it reveals a rather sad but very human truth. Sometimes the person who hurts us the most is also the person we haven't been able to completely let go of, and sometimes the strongest thing isn't revenge to the very end, but maintaining our decency even when our hearts are already scarred. Cain may have disrupted Victor's plans, but what's more valuable is that he didn't allow himself to become another Victor. For me, that's the most beautiful part of such a tense and painful story. On our channel, I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, hypothesizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and interesting perspectives. What are you waiting for to happen to Lily in the next episode of the series? Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.